What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the finale to the Hunger Games series, Mockingjay Part 2. Mockingjay Part 2 is the finale to the Hunger Games series, which was a 3-book series, and they split the last book into 2 movies, which is what most of these young adult novels are doing when they become films. Now, being as I started my channel recently and did not review the previous Hunger Games films on here, I'll give you a quick breakdown of what I thought of each of the other ones, just so you know my opinions of the series thus far. Hunger Games 1 probably gets like a B-. Catching Fire gets an A-, and Mockingjay Part 1 probably gets like a C. Those grades aren't for sure because when I watch them I don't distinctly remember my thoughts, but in the times that I've seen them since then, Catching Fire is the standout as the best film, clearly in my opinion, even after seeing this. Now, Mockingjay Part 2 is the story of the finale of the series. So the rebellion is heading towards the capital to sort of liberate the people of Panem, and that's pretty much the entire story. They have to go through the city, and there's all these traps made by old game makers, and all of these other crazy things that are going on, but that's the story. They're just going there to finish what they started in the first movie. Now, this movie has some pretty solid performances. Basically, the entire cast is pretty good in the film. No one really stands out as being exceptional. The supporting cast in this film was sufficiently chopped down compared to previous films, which I did not enjoy. They seem to take all of these characters that they would have built up in the previous films, and they kind of made them like extreme side characters to where you only see them in maybe a handful of scenes, which I didn't enjoy because a lot of them were very interesting characters that we basically just got cut out of the movie. There were some dialogue moments throughout the film that were pretty good. The script overall was fairly predictable though, and it wasn't exactly something that I thought was exceptional. They did a lot of little moments where there were small quotes that I felt were good in these smaller conversations that would take place, but in the bigger moments, most of the film was fairly predictable in my opinion based on the way the script had led everything up to different moments. The directing of the movie was pretty much on par with the previous Hunger Games films, except for the first one, which had very poor direction, which I think is the primary con with that one. However, this film also had very interesting story elements. This movie brought in a lot more of the warfare aspect to the Hunger Games series, and I really enjoyed that because it gives this movie, although this entire series maybe does not stand up to, I think Harry Potter is basically the level that all of these young adult novels are trying to surpass. I feel like this does not come close to beating Harry Potter. However, I think this one does bring up many more real-life problems, and it shows more of the warfare aspect since it is a much more violent idea for a film or a book, and I think that it does a very good job sort of describing that and giving you those feelings that these characters are having in this actual revolt slash rebellion slash war that they are currently involved in. Now, this is where this movie kind of loses it for me though at the same time. The story elements, while interesting, were few and far between. There would be specific scenes where I was like, that was an interesting moment, and then there'd be one cool action sequence, which there were some pretty cool traps in this movie and some pretty cool action sequences. One really stands out, the rest of them were kind of just average. But overall, this movie dragged, and there were a lot of throwaway moments in it, which is the exact same way I felt about Mockingjay Part 1. I think that of all the movies that have been split into 2, this movie did not need to at all. They did not have the material to make 2 2-hour films about this. The first movie you can make in like 45 minutes, and this movie you can make in like an hour and a half. And that gives you the same length of movie as both of these movies were. Because the first one had so much dialogue that it was just like, okay, I get it, you're building up where they are now, but you never give us any real, like, cherry on top at the end. There's nothing, there's no payout at the end of that movie to make you feel like it was worth the watch. And this one is supposed to be the payout for the last one. However, this one had so many sequences where it was just like, okay, we get it. It's just them moving through the city, and the dialogue sequences, while some were interesting, for the most part were pretty much throwaway sequences that if you took moments from the first and moments from the second and combined them, the movie would have been fine as one 2.5 hour long movie. The ending of this movie particularly dragged for so long. I know that there are people that bring up Lord of the Rings closing out for a long time, but Lord of the Rings is an epic story, and not to kind of discount the Hunger Games, but this story doesn't have that same power behind it. You don't get that same feeling for these characters. So when you take almost a half hour of your movie dedicated to just the ending post what has happened, it's just too much. There was too much there. we didn't need to see all of it. We don't need multiple shots of people sitting around. And that's what we get at the end of this film. I'm not spoiling what happens or who's there or anything like that, but I'm just saying there's a lot of shots of people just sitting around talking, and they weren't necessary shots. And this movie just didn't give you the emotion in some sequences that I feel was really necessary when certain things would happen in action sequences, and then they would kind of just be like, oh, for like 2 seconds it's kind of a thing, and then it just goes away and no one ever really mentions it again. And it's like, that's a pretty big thing to happen to just never talk about. I'm going to give Hunger Games: The Mockingjay Part 2 a C. I think that this movie did a decent job closing out this series. I just really don't understand why they split this into 2 movies, seeing how these scripts were, and seeing how easily it would have been to just mesh them into one. I understand that it's to make money, and they make literally double the money if they do it this way, but to me, it just doesn't make any sense to make a movie that's really slow with a lot of dialogue and a movie that's supposed to be really suspenseful, but it doesn't feel less suspenseful because the whole movie is spent in that suspense. It just goes away fairly quickly. The movie had some decent dialogue, some cool action sequences, and some cool traps, but as a whole, this movie just doesn't really hold up to Catching Fire in any way, and I think that that movie will go down as the best one of this series, and I really don't think the rest of them are that great at all. I think that Catching Fire is a good movie, and then I think the Hunger Games one does a decent job building the world that you're going into, however it was poorly handled, and I feel that these two, if they were one movie, they could have held a candle to Catching Fire, but since they wanted to split them in 2 for money, they just didn't turn out anywhere near as good. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Mockingjay Part 2, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.